Diwakar was telling you about the danger of imposition of death sentences. In spite of a judge being trained at death cases, I was heading a bench where continuously I was dealing with confirmation of deaths. Each case was a challenge for me. The victim has to be seen on the one side. The victim's parents, we are also looking at what is the benefit that the society is getting at putting a person to death. So law has been evolving. You'll have to use your discretion. That discretion cannot be on the basis of what people are thinking. If I am sitting in the court and then say, oh, what is it that people would think tomorrow if I leave this person against whom there is a serious charge? I have seen some terrible cases, but I did not confirm one death. For several reasons and the philosophy which has been laid down by the Supreme dealt with by Anu. And before I leave you, I would just tell you, this is a very interesting topic. You would all really enjoy it. But after this lecture is over, I would like you to go back, read the provisions of the Constitution, read the relevant provisions of the IPC, now I think it is called something else. What is it called now? Please read the relevant provisions of that law, read the relevant provisions of the Evidence Act, and read some interesting material which you would get, as I said, from 39A or otherwise the square. Thank you very much.
Justice Lavu nageswarrao for giving such a wonderful and invaluable message. Now, presentation of a brief profile about our distinguished resource person, Professor Anup Surendranath Garu, by
of 3x3 LLB. It's my honor to introduce our special guest, Dr. Anup Surendranath Garu. Dr. Anup Surendranath Garu is a professor of law at Nalsar University of
framework. And do we have a criminal justice system that is capable of administering the death penalty in any fair manner? So that's the question I have before me. It is not is death penalty good or bad? I'm not interested in that conversation. I'm not trying to make you think about that. That's for another day, right? And I think one other broad concept I want to place before I jump into the specifics of the death penalty is, what do we think of people who commit crimes? How do we understand criminality, right? Are people who commit crimes, is it just about bad wiring in the brain? Is it just about that their genes are criminal and all of us here have non-criminal genes, and therefore biologically I am not inclined to commit crime, whereas everyone who is in prison convicted is biologically either their brain or their genes are wrong and therefore they commit crimes? I think that all of us would understand that that's a very bad idea of understanding why people commit crimes. I often tell my students, quite a few of my students have asked me over the years, sir, how do you sleep at night defending child rapists? Defending people who have raped and murdered children. And I have a very good answer, and then at some point I will get to that. Right? But the point is, the death penalty assumes that those who commit crimes are like bad apples. Right? And if you have a box of apples or oranges or whatever your preferred fruit is, right? That if you have a box of apples, there are some bad apples and there are good apples. As long as we take away the bad apples and throw them away, once we eliminate the bad apples, once we throw it away and extinguish them, society will only be a box of good apples, and the real problem is we are not removing enough bad apples, we are not removing them fast enough. But however, that misunderstands the problem with crime in society. The problem in crime in society is that the apple tree itself is poison. The tree will constantly keep producing bad apples because the tree is poison, right? And when I say tree, I mean society, right? That tree itself is poison, And unless we change society, it would be a mistake to understand that sexual violence in society is a result of people not being able to control their sexual urges. And all the writing on rape and sexual violence will tell you that rape is not about sexual urge gone wrong. It is about power. It is about gender power. It is about men exercising power over women. How we bring up boys as to how versus how we bring up women. What do we think women should do? What women should not do? The kind of freedom men are given. Our movies, our homes, our workplaces, all entrench deeply problematic gender relations where men are given this power over women. And it is that deeply problematic social dynamic that produces crime, right? And there is no point then trying to say that somehow society is not responsible. It's only a bunch of really violent individuals, and therefore the problem is purely individualistic and not social, right? So now, having set those two broad contexts of the rule of law and how to understand criminality, and I understand it's a very brief thing, and one could just talk about each of those things for an entire lecture, right? I just want to move to the death penalty. The Constitution of India recognizes the death penalty, right? In its various provisions, in the appeals provision to the Supreme Court, in the mercy powers, clemency powers of the governor and the president, the Constitution explicitly recognizes the death penalty, right? It says, in certain death penalty cases, this will be the appeals provision, that in certain commutate the power of the president and the governor to commute, it recognizes the death penalty. So the Constitution, there are explicit references to the death penalty in the Constitution, right? But having said that, the question really today is, can the administration of that death penalty that is constitutionally recognized, does its administration and its use meet the constitutional requirements, right? Today we have, I would say roughly about 150 offences which carry the death penalty, right, in India. It is far lesser, right? We have now moved, and as all of you will know, sexual violence on adult women, the death penalty charge is coming through murder as a punishment for murder in 302 of the IPC and whatever else the provision is in the new code, 100 or 101, whatever it is in the BNS, right? The punishment is coming through murder 302, where you have two options, either to give life or death, right? More recently, the POCSO has been amended. I assume everybody knows what the POCSO is, the law against child sexual violence. The POCSO has very worryingly introduced the death penalty for non-homicide rape, right? What does that mean? Then, even when rape occurs, right, in the manner imagined by the POCSO, even if there is no death that has resulted, it assumes, nobody would argue in this room that child rape is okay. Nobody would argue that. Everybody would agree that perhaps child rape is one of the worst offences that one can commit. Then you might say, if it is the worst offences, we must have the worst punishment. We must have the highest punishment. But I think we very often ignore social realities of what criminal law can do and what punishment can do, right, and can achieve. And that classic example is one of child rape, right? The biggest problem as far as child rape and child sexual violence is concerned in this country, for the government's own statistics, only about 5 to 8% of child rape cases are getting reported. When I say reported, it is coming into the criminal justice system, as an FIR or the police system. So what the National Crime Records Bureau is reporting is only what is being reported to it. What is not being reported is not there in the NCRB statistics, right? So as per the government's own statistics, only reporting is roughly around 8%, right? Understanding of child rape in society and child sexual violence in our society, why aren't they think the chips, please. you think the child's future might be damaged. Okay. Anybody else? At the very back, yes sir. Sorry sir. Child rape is stranger rape. Is false. It is also true for adult rape. Adult rape is not the state of reporting, because then the guardian of the child and the child themselves will be asked, do you want to put your uncle to death? Do you want to put your grandfather to death? Do you want to put your close family friend to? That even further creates a problem for reporting. Right? And therefore, while we might be absolutely upset about how terrible child rape is, we need, as lawyers and people who think about public security and safety for women and children in our society, we need to be a little more aware of the dynamics of sexual violence in our society, right? So I just want to think about the use of, the relationship between use of punishment and how to use punishment to, can punishment solve deep social problems, right? So I just want you to, if law could solve everything, we would be the best governed country. We have laws for everything, right? Like that, child labor would disappear, dowry would disappear, domestic violence would disappear. All of that hold lessons, very good lessons for us, that merely because you criminalize and merely because you punish, social problems are not going to get solved, because crimes are socially produced. They are not just individual problems that you can scare people and deter people into not doing, right? So in that sense, I just want to use that example to think of when should we use the death penalty. In India, over the last 10 years, we've just, for referencing our yearly reports, we've just released the annual statistics for 2025, and this is our 10th edition of documenting how the death penalty is used year on year. So this was the 10th edition. We released a 10-year analysis of use of the death penalty in India. Over the last 10 years, nearly 1,500 death sentences have been given by US trial courts. Death sentence by the Supreme Court in the last 3 years, right? And the Supreme Court is increasingly skeptical of the death penalty, right? It's skeptical in the sense that it is not only commuting, it is acquitting death row prisoners in record numbers. Last calendar year, the Supreme Court acquitted 10 death row prisoners. That must shock a system, that after the trial court and the high court have not only confirmed guilt and imposed death, in the second appeal going to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court then reverses not only the death sentence, it reverses the conviction, right? It must worry us as a legal system. Constitutionality, of course, is upheld in Bachan Singh in 1980.